Under the golden desert sun of Sharm el-Sheikh, world leaders gathered for what many have called a turning point in Middle East diplomacy. The air was filled with anticipation, the hum of motorcades, the click of cameras, and the faint sound of Arabic, French, and English voices overlapping across the summit hall. At the heart of it all were two figures whose relationship had defined much of Western diplomacy in recent years, US President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron. The two men, once known for their forceful handshakes and fiery exchanges, now met again on the sidelines of a summit that could determine Gaza's future. Their brief yet symbolic meeting became the most watched moment of the day. It wasn't the length of their conversation that mattered. It was what it represented, a convergence of two major powers, Washington and Paris, standing before a region desperate for stability. Hosted by Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Gaza Peace Summit 2025 drew more than 24 heads of state and senior diplomats. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry had announced before the event that a document aimed at ending the war in the Gaza Strip would be signed. That statement alone set the tone for what was expected to be one of the most consequential gatherings in years. As Macron approached Trump, reporters from across the world leaned forward, cameras ready. The two leaders exchanged a steady handshake, firm and deliberate, neither rushed nor hesitant. For years, their relationship had oscillated between admiration and rivalry, from disagreements over NATO spending to climate accords. But on this day, they appeared aligned. Both leaders smiled briefly for the cameras, speaking in low tones before turning toward the conference venue. The gesture, though simple, carried the weight of diplomacy. It was a handshake that hinted at compromise, an image the world had been waiting for since the guns in Gaza fell silent after 2 years of relentless bloodshed. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense that diplomacy, not destruction, might lead the way forward. Observers noted the contrast in body language. Trump appeared assertive yet calm, his trademark red tie gleaming against his navy suit. Macron, typically reserved, seemed relaxed, even cordial, his demeanor softer than during their famously tense meetings at earlier G7 and NATO summits. Gone was the theatrical contest of strength that had defined their past encounters. In its place, a quiet, measured understanding seemed to emerge. Two world leaders aware of the moment's gravity. Behind closed doors, aides from both sides described extensive consultations that had taken place in the hours leading up to the handshake. Trump was joined by senior advisor Jared Kushner and US envoy Admiral Brad Cooper, both instrumental in shaping the Gaza Recovery Compact that Washington was pushing. Macron arrived with Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné and Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu, reflecting Paris's determination to anchor a European role in post-war reconstruction. Egypt's proposal, the Gaza Peace Framework, was the centerpiece of the summit. The document laid out a roadmap for enforcing the fragile ceasefire, ensuring prisoner exchange verification, and mobilizing a massive $70 billion reconstruction fund for Gaza. It also included clauses on border transparency, security monitoring, and humanitarian corridors. According to sources, Trump had insisted personally on strict anti-smuggling provisions, while Macron advocated for expanded international oversight to prevent future escalation. As news of their meeting broke, international media immediately seized upon the handshake. French outlets called it the return of pragmatic diplomacy, while US networks hailed it as evidence of Trump's global leadership on peace. In Israel, television stations replayed the footage alongside statements from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanking Trump for his steadfast leadership in securing Israel's safety. In Gaza and Ramallah, the reaction was one of cautious hope. Palestinians watching on small screens saw in that brief handshake a sign that perhaps this time the world might not look away.
How are you?
Egyptian state television aired the images live, describing it as a new page in regional history. On social media, the moment went viral. Within minutes, hashtags like Trump-Macron handshake and Gaza summit trended globally. Commentators debated its significance. Was it genuine reconciliation or a carefully staged diplomatic performance? Yet even skeptics agreed the handshake symbolized a shift in tone. For France, it reaffirmed Macron's insistence that Europe must play a central role in peace building beyond its borders. For Trump, it underscored his image as a deal maker, the man who could bring old rivals together to sign what few had believed possible. Inside the summit hall, banners carried a simple slogan: "Rebuild Gaza, restore peace." Delegations from Germany, Turkey, Qatar, the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia sat alongside representatives from the World Bank, the United Nations and the Arab League. Cameras panned over rows of diplomats, interpreters and security aides, all awaiting the official signing of the ceasefire framework. Observers noticed how Macron leaned in to speak briefly to Trump before taking his seat. Their expressions were serious yet cooperative. It was not the stiff diplomacy of earlier years. It was more natural, almost collegial. Analysts noted that both leaders understood the optics. This was not merely about Gaza, but about re-establishing Western credibility in a region long skeptical of it. For Trump, the summit was an opportunity to cement the success of his ceasefire deal, one that had freed hostages, halted bombings, and opened the way for reconstruction. His administration viewed it as a signature achievement, evidence that America could still command global influence without war. Macron, meanwhile, saw it as France's return to relevance in Middle East diplomacy, a chance to balance US dominance with European partnership and moral leadership. The symbolism was clear: a firm handshake, a shared nod, and a mutual acknowledgement that peace, fragile though it may be, required both strength and humility. As the day unfolded, behind the grandeur of the summit hall, quieter moments revealed the human side of diplomacy. Delegates discussed rebuilding schools, hospitals and water systems destroyed by years of conflict. Plans for reopening Gaza's ports and reviving its trade links were drafted. The humanitarian dimension took centre stage, with Macron emphasising aid delivery and Trump calling for strict accountability to ensure funds reach civilians, not militants. Reporters following Macron's press team later confirmed that he and Trump spoke privately for nearly 15 minutes, far longer than originally scheduled. The two reportedly discussed timelines for reconstruction, coordination with Israeli authorities, and the possibility of joint monitoring missions involving European forces. Trump assured Macron that France will have a seat at the table, while Macron reaffirmed his support for an enforceable two-state horizon. The moment might have lasted only seconds on camera, but its implications stretched far beyond. Diplomats said the tone of the summit shifted noticeably afterward. Conversations grew more pragmatic, discussions less combative. Delegates who had entered the room divided by policy left it cautiously united by purpose. As evening fell over Sharm el-Sheikh, the glow of the Red Sea reflected off the summit hall's glass facade. The leaders began departing for private dinners and bilateral meetings. Outside, Egyptian crowds gathered near the fences, waving flags of different nations. Local television replayed the handshake in slow motion. Trump's nod, Macron's smile, the steady grip that signalled a fragile but hopeful consensus. The scene encapsulated the essence of modern diplomacy, not dramatic speeches, but quiet gestures that bridge differences. In the past, Trump and Macron had clashed over climate agreements, tariffs and global leadership. Yet here, at this summit, their handshake stood for something larger than either man. The shared recognition that the world could no longer afford perpetual conflict in Gaza. By nightfall, headlines around the world had declared the moment historic. Trump and Macron seal unity on Gaza peace plan, wrote Le Monde. Symbol of strength, read the Washington Times. Al-Ahram in Cairo simply called it the handshake of hope. But beyond the headlines, the work remained unfinished. Delegations prepared to finalise the text of the ceasefire document overnight, balancing competing interests and security guarantees. The United States, France and Egypt were expected to serve as joint guarantors of the peace framework alongside Qatar and the United Nations. Israeli and Palestinian representatives, though cautious, signalled tentative acceptance of the draft's core principles. For those who had followed the region's long and painful trajectory, the symbolism of that handshake could not be understated. It was a bridge between competing ideologies, nationalism and diplomacy, individualism and cooperation. It was also a signal that the post-war Middle East might, at last, be entering a new phase, one defined not by bombs but by blueprints. Inside the summit venue, the energy remained electric. the world's cameras stayed fixed on the leaders' every move. Behind the podiums, staff from both delegations were already coordinating press releases. Journalists compared notes, searching for quotes, angles and interpretations. In the corridors, aides whispered updates about the pending signature ceremony. Outside, the night air was cooler now. The summit's banners fluttered in the breeze. The sound of applause drifted from inside the hall, followed by the rhythmic clicking of cameras, the universal language of diplomacy in motion. Macron and Trump's handshake, replayed endlessly across screens, would likely become one of the enduring images of the Gaza peace process. It represented a rare alignment of leadership, two figures often divided by ego and ideology, finding a moment of accord in a place long defined by division. By morning, the summit would resume. Speeches, pledges, and policy debates would fill the agenda. But no moment, however scripted or spontaneous, would carry the same weight as that first meeting between Trump and Macron on the sidelines, a meeting that turned a simple gesture into a message of global significance. In a world grown weary of conflict, perhaps it was fitting that progress began not with signatures or speeches, but with a handshake, the quiet, enduring gesture that reminded nations of what diplomacy is truly meant to be. And as the lights dimmed over Sharm el-Sheikh, the message echoed across continents that even amid exhaustion and distrust, peace remains possible if only leaders are willing to reach across the divide and take one another's hand.